What does it take for a life to vanish? Not just from the world, but from memory? We like to think that in our modern world, with cameras on every corner and information at our fingertips, it's impossible for someone to simply disappear. And yet, history is littered with cases that defy reason, where the truth slips through the cracks and the silence left behind becomes deafening. Tamzen Parsons' story is one of those cases. A name you've likely never heard before, and yet, once you do, it's hard to forget. She wasn't a celebrity. She didn't live in the glare of the public eye. She was a daughter, a friend, someone with her own quiet routines and small joys. But in the span of a single night, she went from living an ordinary life to becoming the subject of one of the most baffling and sinister, unsolved mysteries in her community's history. The events that unfolded are disturbing, not because they involve shocking violence or elaborate criminal masterminds, but because of their unnerving simplicity. A woman was here, and then she wasn't, in her place. Only unanswered questions and unsettling fragments remained. The official records paint a sparse picture, a few witness statements, some physical evidence that raises more doubts than answers, and a police investigation that seemed thorough on the surface, but left gaping holes beneath. Over time, speculation took root. Some believed Tamzen fell victim to someone she trusted. Others think she might have stumbled into something far larger, a chain of events she never could have anticipated. And then there are those who wonder if the truth was known all along, just never spoken aloud. We will walk through her life before that fateful day, the circumstances that led to her disappearance, and the investigation that followed. We'll examine the leading theories, the ones that seem obvious, and the ones that make you glance over your shoulder and consider how, despite so much time passing, the mystery remains stubbornly unsolved. As we unravel the threads of Tamzen's case, I want you to think about the moments in your own life where you felt safe, the familiar places, the people you trusted. Imagine one of those moments being the very thing that led you into danger. Could you have seen it coming? Or would you have stepped forward, just as she did, unaware of what lay ahead? This is the chilling and mysterious case of Tamzen Parsons, a haunting true crime story that still disturbs to this day. Before her name became tied to a case file, before it became something whispered in coffee shops and mentioned in old newspaper columns, Tamzen Parsons was just Tamzen. She was the kind of person you might pass on the street without thinking twice. But if you'd stopped to speak with her, you'd have remembered her for a long time. There was a warmth in her voice, a softness in her way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Tamzen was 34 years old at the time of her disappearance, living in a small but bright apartment above a bakery in the center of town. The scent of fresh bread and coffee was often the first thing she woke up to in the mornings. A detail she once told a friend made her feel rich, even when her bank account said otherwise. She wasn't wealthy, and she didn't live extravagantly, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made her life seem full in ways money couldn't measure. She worked at the local library, a job she'd held for nearly 8 years. It wasn't just a paycheck to her. It was a place where she could spend her days surrounded by the things she loved most: books, stories, and the quiet hum of people searching for something. She often joked that she liked helping people find answers, even if it was just the location of a novel or the right microfilm reel. Her coworkers described her as dependable, never one to leave a task unfinished. She wasn't loud or flashy, but she had a dry, understated sense of humor that came out in small bursts, like the time she taped googly eyes on all the photocopier toner boxes, just to make her boss laugh, outside of work. Tamzen's life was slow-paced but content. She had a small circle of close friends rather than a wide social network. Friday evenings were often spent at a friend's apartment watching old films, while Sunday mornings were reserved for long walks in the park. She had no children, And while she had dated in the past, she wasn't seeing anyone seriously at the time. She seemed to enjoy her independence, not as a statement, but simply because she liked the life she had. Tamzen was also deeply connected to her family, especially her younger sister, Claire. The two spoke on the phone almost every day, swapping stories about their work weeks, or sending each other pictures of their respective pets. Claire had a dog, Tamzen, a tabby cat named Leonard. Her parents lived a few towns over, and she visited them often, usually showing up with a basket of pastries from the bakery downstairs. Those close to her say she was thoughtful in ways that didn't always draw attention to themselves. A handwritten birthday card, an unexpected check-in call, a remembered detail about someone's bad day. There was nothing in her life, at least from the outside, that hinted at trouble. No debts, no grudges, no feuds or feints toward risky behavior. She wasn't the sort to make enemies, and she wasn't drawn to the kind of places where bad things happen quickly. If anything, she seemed careful, a trait that made what happened to her all the more baffling. Yet, beneath that image of stability, there were tiny details, the kind you only notice when looking back, that some now wonder about. A coworker remembered Tamzen being a little distracted in the week before she disappeared, staring out the window longer than usual, her mind somewhere else. Her sister recalled that one phone call ended more abruptly than normal, with Tamzen saying she had something to take care of and promising to explain later. At the time, no one thought much of it. Life is full of small interruptions and half-finished thoughts. But in hindsight, those little moments take on a weight that's hard to ignore. She was also known to take solitary evening walks, a habit she enjoyed even in cooler weather. Friends sometimes teased her about it, warning her about safety, but she brushed it off, saying she liked the quiet and the way the streets looked under the glow of the street lamps. It was a habit that made her disappearance feel even more unsettling, because it meant she could have been alone unseen when something happened. To know Tamzen's story is to understand that she wasn't looking for trouble, and she certainly wasn't living in fear. She was simply moving through life in the steady, unremarkable rhythm we all hope for. Work, friends, family, the quiet comforts of routine. And maybe that's what makes this case so haunting. Because if someone like her, with no apparent enemies and no signs of danger, could vanish without explanation, then what does that mean for the rest of us? When you strip away the crime scene reports, the theories, and the speculation, what remains is a picture of a woman who should have been safe. A woman whose absence left a quiet apartment above a bakery, an empty chair in the library's staff room, and a cat waiting by the door for someone who never came home. That's who Tamzen Parsons was before the night everything changed. A daughter, a sister, a friend, someone whose life should have continued on in the same gentle, steady way. But instead, her name is now spoken in the same breath as words like unsolved and cold case. And the truth of what happened to her, whatever it may be, still hides somewhere in the shadows she left behind. It was the morning of October 14th, 1997, when the world of those who knew Tamzen Parsons shifted in a way that could never be undone. It began like any other Tuesday, the kind of day that doesn't announce itself as significant. The weather in Eden, Massachusetts was cool but pleasant, with a crisp breeze and the pale sunlight of mid-autumn casting long shadows over the streets. Leaves drifted lazily from the maple trees that lined the sidewalks, and the town moved at its usual unhurried pace. By all accounts, Tamzen started her day early. Her neighbor, Alice Morgan, recalled seeing her around 7:15 a.m., stepping out to retrieve the mail in a light gray cardigan and jeans. She smiled at me, like she always did, Alice later told investigators. There was nothing unusual. She didn't seem rushed or upset. Tamzen's boyfriend, Elliot Reed, said she called him at 7:45 a.m., to confirm their dinner plans that evening. She was in good spirits. Elliot recounted in his interview with local news. "We laughed about something stupid I'd said the night before. I never thought it would be the last time I'd hear her voice." Between 8 o'clock and 10 a.m., Tamzen followed what friends described as her usual morning pattern. She ran errands in town, the dry cleaners, the small grocery store on Main Street. Security footage from Henderson's Market, timestamped 9:17 a.m., shows her at the checkout counter, smiling at the cashier and holding a paper bag of groceries. Nothing seemed out of place, but there is a curious gap that has haunted this timeline ever since. Between 10:15 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., Tamzen's whereabouts are unknown. Her car, a navy blue Toyota Camry, was not seen in its usual spots, and none of her friends or acquaintances reported running into her. It's a small gap, just over an hour, but in the days that followed, it would become one of the focal points of the investigation. At 11:40 a.m., a woman matching Tamzen's description was reportedly seen outside Baker's Creek Bridge, a quiet, somewhat secluded spot about 15 minutes from her home. A fisherman named Gareth Lowell told police that he saw her leaning against the bridge railing, staring down into the water. He didn't approach. She looked like she wanted to be alone, he explained, but he noticed something odd. A dark sedan parked about 30 feet away with its engine running. When police later tried to confirm the sighting, there was no definitive proof it had been Tamzen, but Lowell remained convinced. "It was her," he said. "The sweater, the hair. I'd seen her around town before." At 12:15 p.m., Tamzen called her friend Carla Jensen from her landline at home. Carla recalled that the conversation felt hurried. "She told me she couldn't talk long," Carla said. Her tone, it wasn't scared exactly, but it was distracted, like she had something on her mind. No one knows what she did in the 2 hours that followed. Her phone records show no outgoing calls after speaking to Carla, and there's no record of any purchases or visits during that period. It's as if she vanished into a space between ordinary moments. The last confirmed sighting came at 2:05 p.m., when a postal worker saw her walking toward her driveway, holding what appeared to be an envelope. He remembered her looking over her shoulder twice, as though checking if someone was behind her. By 6 p.m., Elliot had arrived at Tamzen's house for their dinner date, only to find her car parked out front, but no answer at the door. He called her phone, no response. At first, he assumed she'd been delayed somewhere, but after an hour, concerns started to creep in. The lights in the house were on, the groceries from that morning still sitting neatly on the kitchen counter, and her cardigan draped over the back of a chair. Elliot would later say, "It was like she had stepped out for a minute and never came back." At 7:45 p.m., he contacted Tamzen's mother, Margaret Parsons, who confirmed she hadn't heard from her daughter all day. Together, they called the police to file a missing person report, though the initial response was cautious, suggesting that maybe Tamzen had simply decided to take a spontaneous trip or stay with a friend. Those who knew her insisted that was impossible. Tamzen wasn't the kind of person who disappeared without telling someone. What stands out about this day, even now, is how normal it was, right up until it wasn't. There was no single dramatic event, no loud break in the flow of life, only small, easily overlooked moments that, when stitched together, paint an unsettling picture: a smile to a neighbor, a quick grocery trip, an hour unaccounted for, a possible sighting by a bridge, a hurried phone call, and then silence for everyone who loved Tamzen Parsons. That day is frozen in amber, the day before the questions began, before the search parties, before the headlines. The day that, looking back, seemed so ordinary until it became the moment everything changed. When news of Tamzen Parsons' disappearance reached the local police department, the initial reaction was the same as in so many missing person cases. A quiet hope that she would turn up within hours. Officers began with the basics, retracing her last known movements, speaking to the people who had seen her that day, and checking places she was known to frequent. But even in these early hours, something about the case felt off. There were gaps in the timeline, statements that didn't quite align, and an unsettling lack of the kind of physical evidence detectives usually lean on. The first formal report came from Tamzen's sister, Holly, who had grown concerned when her calls went unanswered well into the evening. Holly told police that Tamzen was punctual to a fault. If she said she would meet you at a certain time, she would be there, and if something came up, she would call. Her phone going silent wasn't just unusual. It was unthinkable. Within the first 24 hours, officers conducted a welfare check at Tamzen's small apartment. They found no signs of forced entry. The door was locked from the outside, as if she had left willingly or locked it behind her. Inside, the scene was strangely neutral. Her bed made, dishes clean, her keys and wallet gone. One item stood out, her phone charger still plugged into the wall, as if she had left in a hurry or expected to return soon. Detectives started by speaking with the people closest to Tamzen. Her colleagues from the bookstore said she had left work in good spirits that afternoon, mentioning vague plans to run an errand before heading home. A cashier at a nearby grocery store recalled seeing her buying a small bag of produce. Around 5:30 p.m., the last confirmed sighting before she seemed to vanish. Other statements were less clear. One neighbor swore she saw Tamzen talking to a man outside her building later that evening. She described him as tall, wearing a dark jacket, and standing unusually close to her, as if they knew each other. Another neighbor, however, claimed they saw no one matching that description, and insisted the hallway was quiet all night. These conflicting accounts forced police to tread carefully. Was the first neighbor misremembering? Or was the second not paying close enough attention? Naturally, suspicion first turned to people within Tamzen's circle. A former boyfriend was brought in for questioning. He claimed they hadn't spoken in months and had no idea where she could be. His alibi, dinner with friends across town, checked out, though detectives couldn't entirely shake the sense that he was withholding something. Then there was the man from the neighbor's account. Without a name or clear description, identifying him was an uphill battle. Police canvassed the area, asking residents if they recognized the figure. A few claimed they might have seen someone similar, but none could place him with certainty. No CCTV cameras covered the building's entrance, a frustrating gap in surveillance that would haunt the case for years. From the start, physical evidence was thin. No fingerprints out of place, no signs of struggle, no dropped belongings. The grocery store receipt provided a timestamp, but nothing more. Even her phone, which might have offered a trail, was never found. Without it, police couldn't track her calls, texts, or location data. A search of nearby wooded areas and waterways turned up nothing. Volunteers combed through undergrowth, checking abandoned buildings and alleys, but found no trace. Forensic teams processed her apartment, but recovered nothing that hinted at foul play or, frustratingly, at voluntary departure. The absence of physical evidence left detectives at a disadvantage. Without a body, a crime scene, or a digital trail, there was little to build a case on. In 2007, when Tamzen disappeared, cell phone tracking technology was not as advanced as today's standards. Data retention laws meant that if her phone had been switched off, the trail would have gone cold almost immediately. One officer later remarked that it was like investigating a ghost. Tamzen had simply stepped out of her life and evaporated into the air. Local news picked up the story quickly, with Tamzen's photo plastered on evening broadcasts. Her image, a warm smile, dark hair tucked behind one ear, resonated with viewers. Social media was still in its early days, but community forums buzzed with theories. Some insisted she had been taken by someone she knew. Others speculated about a random abduction. A smaller, more conspiratorial corner even suggested she had chosen to disappear, though friends and family dismissed that outright. As weeks passed without progress, the tone shifted. Public interest waned, replaced by frustration. Comments appeared online criticizing the investigation's pace. Why aren't they finding anything? One post read, "It's like they don't even want to solve it." Not all tips were helpful. One man claimed he saw Tamzen boarding a bus in another city, a lead that collapsed when CCTV footage showed the woman in question was someone else entirely. Another tip suggested she had been spotted in a diner several states away. But waitstaff there had no memory of her. Perhaps the strangest lead came from an anonymous caller who claimed to have overheard two men discussing getting rid of a girl near the river. The caller refused to give their name, and despite a search of the riverbank, police found no evidence to support the claim. Some observers have pointed out inconsistencies in the police's public statements. In early press briefings, officials hinted that they had several promising leads, yet weeks later admitted they were at a standstill. The case file remains partly sealed, leading to speculation that there are details being withheld, whether to protect the investigation or because they are too unsettling to reveal is anyone's guess. When you look at Tamzen Parsons' case, the most immediate and widely accepted theory seems, at first glance, almost too clear. Many believe that her disappearance was the result of someone she knew, possibly someone from her immediate circle, who had both motive and opportunity. The reasoning is straightforward. Crimes like this, especially those involving no forced entry, no signs of struggle in public view, and a sudden vanishing without witnesses, often point toward someone close to the victim. Tamzen had a small but close-knit group of friends, a supportive family, and a few acquaintances from work and the local community. On the surface, it all looked harmonious. But when investigators began peeling back the layers, they found hints, subtle yet undeniable, of strain. There had been a disagreement with a former boyfriend a few months before she vanished. Some neighbors recalled overhearing heated conversations late at night. Others mentioned seeing an unfamiliar car parked outside her home in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. From a police standpoint, this theory was practical. The timeline worked. People close to Tamzen would have known her habits, her schedule, and her vulnerabilities. They would have known when she'd be alone and how to approach her without raising alarms. Forensic possibilities, too, lined up neatly with this narrative. In many such cases, no forced entry suggests the victim willingly opened the door, something they would rarely do for a stranger. Supporters of this theory also point to the lack of immediate chaos at the scene. Her belongings were intact, her phone left behind on the kitchen counter, and her front door unlocked. These details, they argue, suggest a voluntary step outside, perhaps to speak with someone she trusted, a meeting that turned deadly. And yet there's something that doesn't quite add up. For one, no direct physical evidence tied any of her friends or family members to the crime. Interviews revealed inconsistencies, but nothing substantial enough to lead to charges. Those heated arguments the neighbors reported, they couldn't pinpoint exact dates, and some even admitted they might have been misremembering. The mysterious car sightings lacked license plate details, and without security camera coverage in that area, those leads went cold quickly. There's also the problem of motive. While disagreements and strained relationships are not uncommon, nothing in Tamzen's known history suggested a feud severe enough to escalate into violence or murder. Financial gain seemed unlikely. She wasn't known to keep large amounts of cash or valuables at home. Jealousy was considered, but investigators could not find recent signs of romantic entanglements that might explain it. Moreover, some forensic experts involved in the case noted that the absence of physical struggle did not necessarily mean the perpetrator was someone she trusted. It was equally possible she had been taken by surprise, subdued quickly, and removed without leaving obvious marks of resistance. Still, the theory persists because it feels grounded in reality. Statistically, victims of violent crime are far more likely to be harmed by someone they know than by a stranger. It's an unsettling truth, one that fits uncomfortably well with what little evidence exists. But as much as this explanation might satisfy a surface-level reading of the case, it's precisely that neatness that bothers some observers. In stories like Tamzen's, where the trail runs cold and key facts remain elusive, the most obvious answer is not always the right one. Sometimes, what appears clear is only a convenient placeholder for what we cannot yet explain. The question then becomes, if it wasn't someone close to her, then who? And that's where the unsettling possibilities begin to creep in. If the idea that someone close to Tamzen Parsons was responsible feels logical, but incomplete, the second theory takes us into darker, more unsettling territory, one where the answers are far less tidy. This theory suggests that Tamzen may have been the victim of an unknown individual, possibly a predator, who had been watching her for some time. It's hard not to wonder about the string of strange, seemingly unrelated reports from the weeks before she vanished. Several residents in the area recalled seeing a tall man in a dark hooded sweatshirt loitering near the walking trail that ran behind Tamzen Street. One woman claimed he appeared there on multiple mornings, always keeping his face turned away when people passed. Another neighbor remembered hearing the sound of a car idling late at night near the end of Tamzen's Road, an area without through traffic, on more than one occasion, individually. These sightings might be dismissed as coincidence, but taken together and paired with the fact that Tamzen's home backed onto a secluded wooded area, it begins to paint an unnerving picture. Could it be possible that she had been under surveillance by someone she didn't know? Someone who was waiting for the right moment to act? Supporters of this theory point out that stranger abductions are rare, but when they do occur, they are often meticulously planned. If Tamzen had stepped outside to let the cat in, take out the trash, or investigate a noise, even for just a minute, it would have been enough time for a prepared offender to strike. The unlocked door could indicate she expected to return immediately. Never imagining danger was only steps away. There's also the curious matter of a reported break-in 2 streets over, just 5 days before Tamzen disappeared. The intruder, never caught, left behind almost no trace except for a cut window screen and muddy footprints. The homeowner told police they didn't think anything was stolen, which some find odd, as though the break-in's purpose was not theft, but scouting. No one officially connected this event to Tamzen's case, but the proximity and timing make it difficult to ignore. Critics of this theory argue that the absence of a body, personal items, or forensic evidence makes the idea of a stranger in the night less convincing. Without surveillance footage, the alleged man in the hoodie could have been anyone, a jogger, a local teen, or someone entirely unrelated. And without direct proof, the suspicious car and the nearby break-in remain frustratingly ambiguous. Yet the more unsettling possibility is that this ambiguity is exactly what makes the theory plausible. A skilled, opportunistic offender, perhaps someone transient, with no fixed address and no connection to the community, could have committed the crime and left without a trace. In such cases, the trail often goes cold almost immediately, leaving little for investigators to work with. Some have even speculated about a link to other disappearances in the broader region, though authorities have never confirmed such a connection. Still, whispers persist. Could Tamzen have been one of several victims of a roaming predator who knew how to operate in silence, leaving heartbreak and unanswered questions in their wake? In the end, while there's someone close to her, theory offers a sense of familiarity and control. This stranger danger theory strips that comfort away. It suggests that Tamzen's fate may have been determined not by the people she trusted, but by an unknown shadow who stepped briefly into her life and then vanished, taking the truth with them. If this theory is correct, then Tamzen's disappearance isn't just a tragedy for her family and friends. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threat isn't the one you see coming, it's the one that's been watching you all along. In the first few days after Tamzen Parsons vanished, it felt like the entire community was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable breakthrough, a crucial piece of evidence, a credible sighting, some sign she was still out there. But as hours became days and days became weeks, the momentum began to slow. Leads that once seemed promising fizzled under scrutiny. Witness statements conflicted, timelines blurred, and small inconsistencies became black holes that swallowed entire avenues of investigation. The supposed man in the hoodie was never identified. The car spotted idling at the end of her road was traced to a local delivery driver, except the driver swore he'd never been on that street. Even the reported break-in nearby led nowhere. No fingerprints, no DNA, no arrests. The police were candid in their frustration. They admitted early on that, without physical evidence, no body, no weapon, no confirmed crime scene, they were piecing the puzzle together in the dark. The few items taken from Tamzen's home, such as her phone and purse, were maddeningly unhelpful. The phone had been powered off minutes after she was last seen, its final ping somewhere in a wide, rural area that offered no definitive search location. As weeks turned into months, the case began to recede from headlines. The early flood of volunteers who'd searched the wooded trails dwindled to a trickle. Flyers yellowed on telephone poles, their edges curling in the weather. Tamzen's family kept her name alive through interviews and vigils, but even they could feel public interest waning. "You can almost hear the silence," her sister once said. "It's like the world is moving on." But we're still stuck on the day she disappeared. There were moments when hope briefly flared. An anonymous tip about a woman matching Tamzen's description in a neighboring town. A set of skeletal remains discovered by hikers miles away, but each lead ended in disappointment. The remains belonged to someone else. The sighting turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. Every time, it felt like the family was being yanked between hope and heartbreak. The emotional toll was staggering. Friends described Tamzen's parents as shadows of themselves, unable to sleep without the porch light on, as if she might somehow still walk back through the door. Birthdays passed without her. Holidays became something to endure rather than celebrate. And always, the question lingered. How could someone vanish so completely, without a trace, in a community where everyone knew everyone? Over the years, police revisited the case periodically. New detectives would take a fresh look, reviewing the thin file of evidence, hoping a new perspective might spot something missed. Sometimes new technology offered possibilities, advances in DNA testing, for instance, but without physical evidence to re-examine, the breakthroughs remained hypothetical. What does remain are the little fragments that continue to haunt those who knew her. The unlocked door, the half-finished cup of tea on the kitchen counter, the sense that whatever happened, it happened fast. There's also the lingering question of why Tamzen, a cautious, street-smart woman, would have opened her door at that time of night at all. Was it someone she knew, or someone she didn't have time to fear? Even now, years later, the case has never been formally closed. It sits in the unsolved drawer, gathering dust until the right piece of information, or the right person willing to talk, breathes life back into it. Occasionally, the local police receive an anonymous letter or a late-night call from someone claiming to know something. Most of these tips are dead ends, but the possibility that one might eventually lead to the truth keeps the door. However slightly ajar, the trail may have gone cold, but the mystery of Tamzen Parsons refuses to fade. She is still there, in the minds of her family, in the quiet moments when they imagine her laugh, in the still burning candle on her mother's windowsill. And until the day someone finally steps forward with the truth, her disappearance will remain an open wound in a small town that learned the hard way that sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones without endings. Thank you for joining me in revisiting the haunting disappearance of Tamzen Parsons. Cases like this linger in the quiet corners of history, stories without endings, where questions outnumber answers and the truth feels just out of reach. If you've ever heard of this case, or if you have your own thoughts about what might have happened, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Every perspective matters, and sometimes even the smallest detail can bring new light to forgotten stories. If you'd like to explore more quiet, haunting investigations into unsolved mysteries and chilling cold cases, consider subscribing. Your support helps keep these stories alive, so the people at their center are never truly forgotten.